Your great-great-grandparents woke up at the same time every night, and they weren't losing sleep over it. You are. Here's why. It's 2 a.m. You're lying in bed. Your eyes are open. Your phone is face down beside you, and you're telling yourself not to check it. You can't stop thinking. You assume something is wrong with you. But the real answer is far stranger. For most of human history, waking up in the middle of the night wasn't a malfunction. It was the plan. Your body still remembers a world that no longer exists. Before electric light, before alarm clocks, before glowing screens, your ancestors didn't sleep the way you do. They didn't slide into 8 unbroken hours and rise with the sun. They slept in 2 distinct shifts, with a strange, quiet hour awake in between. And that hour wasn't wasted. It was lived in. Historian Roger Kirch spent over a decade digging through diaries, court records, and medical texts from pre-industrial Europe, and he kept finding the same 2 words again and again. First, sleep. Second, sleep. People described going to bed shortly after dark, sleeping for 3 or 4 hours, then waking naturally somewhere around midnight. Not in panic. Not in distress. They simply woke up, the way you wake up at the end of a long stretch of rest. What did they do with that hour? They prayed. They talked. They had sex. They tended the fire. Some got up and visited neighbors, walking through dark streets to sit by someone else's hearth for a while before returning to bed. Kirch found records of people using this window to interpret their dreams, since the boundary between sleep and waking felt thinner in the middle of the night, almost sacred. Then, when the body was ready, they returned to bed for a second sleep that carried them through to dawn. This wasn't a quirk of one country or one century. It shows up across cultures, across continents, in records stretching back hundreds of years. Somewhere along the way, it vanished. And the reason it vanished tells you almost everything about why you're awake right now. Light did it. Cheap, abundant, artificial light. Stopwatch equals 0.5. Before gas lamps and electric bulbs, night was night. Truly dark. Once the sun went down, there was little reason to stay alert, and even less light to do anything by. The body responded the only way it could. It rested early, woke in the middle of the dark hours when there was nothing pressing to do, then drifted back into a second stretch of sleep until morning light returned. Darkness didn't just allow this rhythm. It built it. Then the lights stayed on. Streets stayed lit. Homes stayed bright long after sunset. And the segmented sleep pattern, the one your ancestors lived inside for thousands of years, quietly disappeared from most of the world within a few generations. Not because it was inefficient. Because the conditions that produced it disappeared first. Stopwatch equals 1. Here's where it gets stranger. This pattern didn't just live in old European records. It still exists today, in places where artificial light hasn't fully taken over. Neuroscientist Jerome Siegel led a study tracking the sleep of 3 modern hunter-gatherer and forager-horticulturalist groups, including the Hadza of Tanzania and the San of Namibia, communities with no electricity and no artificial light pollution. Using small wrist monitors, his team recorded their sleep patterns night after night, expecting to find something close to that historical 2-phase pattern. What they found was a little different, and arguably even more telling. These groups didn't reliably split into 2 sleeps. But they did share something else with the Kirch's pre-industrial Europeans, a consistent period of wakefulness woven naturally into the night, timed loosely to temperature and darkness rather than any clock. Their bodies weren't fighting the night. They were listening to it. Anthropologist Carol Worthman, who has spent decades studying sleep across cultures, has described how sleep itself is far less universal than people assume. In many traditional societies, sleep happens in shared spaces, interrupted by children, fires, animals, conversation, and it's treated as flexible rather than sacred. Compare that to your bedroom. Door closed. Lights off. Phone banished to a drawer if you're trying to do everything right. Silence enforced like a rule. You've been told that unbroken, uninterrupted sleep is the only correct kind. But for most of human history, that wasn't true at all. So why does waking up at 2 a.m. feel like failure now? Because you're measuring your body against a standard it was never built for. The 8-hour, lights out, one block sleep you're chasing is barely 200 years old. Your nervous system, your circadian rhythm, the deep biological clockwork ticking inside every cell, is tens of thousands of years older than that. When you wake at 2 a.m. with your mind suddenly clear, a little anxious, maybe even creative, you're not broken. You're echoing an ancient and ordinary rhythm that simply doesn't have a place to land anymore. There's no fire to tend, no neighbor's hearth to visit, no ritual built around that hour. So instead, you reach for your phone, because it's the only flicker of light and company still available in the middle of the night. Ekirch has pointed out that the modern anxiety around waking at night, the racing thoughts, the dread of not falling back asleep, may have less to do with the waking itself and more to do with not knowing what that hour is for anymore. Think about that for a second. The wakefulness isn't the problem. The absence of purpose inside it might be. Your ancestors didn't lie there fighting the moment. They used it. They let it be slow, quiet, almost meditative. No pressure to perform productivity at 2 a.m., no scrolling, no glow searing into the back of the eyes. Just firelight, low voices, half-formed dreams still clinging to the edges of the mind. There's something almost tender in that picture. A whole household, awake together in the dark, in no rush to return to sleep. Compare that to now. You're alone with a screen that was engineered to keep your attention, in a culture that treats wakefulness at night as a problem to be medicated rather than a rhythm to be understood. No wonder it feels worse. You're not just awake. You're awake and isolated, awake and anxious, awake without a script for what to do next. So, what can you actually do with this? Not flip back to candlelight and segmented sleep on purpose. That's not realistic, and Ekirch himself never argued for it. But you can stop treating that 2 a.m. wakefulness as proof that something is wrong with you. If you wake in the night and your mind is calm, you don't need to force sleep back immediately. You can lie there. Breathe. Let your thoughts drift the way a mind was always meant to drift in the dark, before light made that pause feel like an emergency. Some sleep researchers today even suggest that resisting the panic around night waking, rather than the waking itself, is what actually helps people fall back asleep faster. The goal was never to engineer 8 perfect, uninterrupted hours. The goal was to work with a rhythm that already lives inside you. So tonight, when you wake at 2 a.m. and your eyes open in the dark, you don't have to reach for your phone. You don't have to assume the worst. You're not malfunctioning. You're remembering something your body never forgot.